Hello, welcome to CrossCurrents, produced by the City of Fort Collins in cooperation with the Larimer County League of Women Voters. I'm Barbara Rutstein, the moderator for today's program. The views expressed on this program are solely those of the participants and don't necessarily reflect the views of Fort Collins TV, the City of Fort Collins, or the Larimer County League of Women Voters. Our topic is the threat to our vote. Is it real? Here in Colorado, we assume that our elections and voting systems are secure. We register, we vote, and we believe our votes are tallied accurately. Of course, we bemoan the fact that some people don't register to vote who are citizens, and many who are just don't vote. Some say it doesn't matter, and some may be put off by concerns about voting security. We have learned since the 2016 election, that Colorado is one of 21 states whose voting systems were targeted by foreign hackers. United States security officials are very concerned about the 2018 election and that it may be targeted again. They also say it is imperative for states to enhance their electoral systems to ensure that our voting systems are not being tampered with. Colorado passed legislation in 2009 that required counties to conduct risk-limiting audits by the 2014 midterm election. We missed that deadline, but officials tell us the system is ready for the November election. We are very fortunate to have on our panel today a very knowledgeable people who will explain not only how to register and be sure your registration is valid, but also to assure you that the vote will be tabulated accurately. On my right is Pam Anderson, Executive Director of the Colorado County Clerks Association. On her right is John Young, a Coloradoan columnist and Front Range Community College instructor. On his right is Elizabeth Steele, Colorado Common Cause Election Director. And on her right is Dwight Shellman, Elections Division from the Colorado Secretary of State's office. Welcome to you and to our viewing audience and our studio audience. To begin with, let's find out if any of you have heard any concerns about our voting process or voter security. Who wants to start? Elizabeth?
Sure, I'd be glad to start. In terms of voting security and voting elections, we don't hear very many concerns. Common Cause runs a nonpartisan hotline call center every election cycle, so we get thousands of calls from Colorado voters. Most of them are confused and or looking for where they can drop off a ballot or something like that, but we don't hear very many concerns about security. The one time that we have heard concerns, not necessarily about security, but concerns about the process of voting related to the production of the voter file in connection with the Pence-Kobach Election Integrity Commission earlier this year, which, some voters were concerned about the production of their information. But I actually think that most Coloradans feel like their vote is quite secure, and we spend, at Common Cause at least, a lot of time explaining to them why they should feel that way.
I'm Pam Anderson, Executive Director for the Clerks Association, and I served as the Jefferson County Clerk and Recorder for 8 years. And certainly we've been talking a lot, since 2000, the presidential election in Florida, about election security, and for many years, and election administrators in our state have worked diligently over the years to continually examine and improve our process. And I think most recently we've heard more about hacking in the national conversation around campaign hacking more than anything else. And yes, there have been internet attempts on registration systems, but the Secretary of State's office, which I think Dwight can speak to most fluently, for many years since we went to a centralized registration system, has improved the security, grid cards, security agreements with anyone who has access, limited administrative access, all of those things in order to protect all our systems and have redundancies in place to do that. With respect to the actual election system, it's important to distinguish between what's a campaign and how we cast and count your ballot. All of our systems, our vote tabulators and any equipment has no connection to the internet. We're prohibited from having any connection to the internet. It is secure both with that and other security mechanisms like key card access and cameras and dual authentication, all of these techniques that we use in Colorado to ensure security.
Okay, John, what's your reaction? Have you heard as a columnist any kind of questions about voter security?
Oh my goodness. Anybody who watches a cable news network is going to have feelings about these matters. And as a citizen of Colorado, I think it's incumbent on folks like these to inform as much as possible. And of course, this rests on the media as well, to inform people about how the system works and any potential concerns. Colorado really is a model for the nation in so many ways. However, regardless of what Colorado is doing now, we're constantly moving into unknown territory about any number of concerns about tabulation and just the whole elections process, the vote counting process. So I'm interested to hear personally about the system that has been established and how it works and what it means. But on a national scale, we are one of the biggest stories in our time has happened in regards to the security of the ballot, with what you just mentioned, Russian attempt to at least stick a thumb into voter systems, and people are going to be interested. So,
Okay, Dwight, what do you know from the Secretary of State's point of view?
So the level of interest in election security has definitely increased since the 2016 election cycle. Colorado has been, I really believe, a leader in all types of systems security for many, many years. Part of the problem here is that even the national media outlets are just not very careful about the language they use. For example, it was widely reported that 21 states were known to have been scanned. Their voting systems were scanned. Well, that's not true. In election geek parlance,
Correct us
voting
then.
system is technically the combination of hardware and software that tabulates votes on ballots. As Pam mentioned, that is air-gapped from any connectivity to the internet. That isn't necessarily a magic pill, but it is an important layer of security that we have had in Colorado since I've been involved in this field since 2010. I know well before that. What the DHS was reporting and the national media outlets were reporting were scans of voter registration systems. They by design are completely independent of the systems that count votes. And they have to be on the internet because it's a centralized system that all counties use. And the fact that 21 states were scanned is not surprising. At the Secretary of State's office, our systems are scanned hundreds or thousands of times a day. We see it all the time. We have really important network monitoring tools in place to alert us immediately. We share that information with an organization called MS-ISAC. Every 2 minutes, we send them an encrypted file of every IP address that has pinged our systems. That allows.
Why would they be doing that? What is that for?
People do that for the analogy that's most often used is a potential house robber walking down the street checking to see if the door is locked. If the door is locked, they go to the next house. They go to the house with the unlocked door. But there's also some legitimate commercial reasons why that happens. We have a very large business and licensing division, and that information is public. We have subscribers to that information, and they ping our systems constantly to get completely updated records. So the fact that we were scanned, and I honestly believe the Department of Homeland Security included us in the list because we notified them that we were scanned.
I see.
That is kind of a customary experience in today's age.
Okay,
And
yes.
I was going to ask Dwight, the scan or the pinging of your system would also include the online voter registration? So if someone was registering to vote online, that would be included in these, the IP addresses that were,
I guess I don't believe that's true.
Okay.
If we have a successful
that would account
transaction
for a
on
large
online
number of
voter
them.
registration, I don't think we would treat that as a ping or a scan.
Okay.
It's somebody that's just knocking on the front door of our network trying to get in, and they have.
okay.
And I do think in some ways, the attention to this issue has been beneficial for states. I do believe that Colorado is on the forefront and has implemented in advance of this becoming a national conversation many protections for our systems. For example, we're a paper-based system. Our ballots are all on paper. And that provides advantages for us in the event we determine through a new audit we can talk about today, if something has gone wrong with tabulation, we have a way to go into those paper ballots and resolve that issue. One of the things that's been really beneficial is Congress has just approved funding to support security in the states. Colorado will benefit from that, and the Colorado County Clerks Association has been active in inviting security experts to talk about local security in our counties, because remember, that the state or some of our large counties like the one I represented have resources to do this. They have IT departments, and what we want to make sure is are those resources get to our rural counties who their IT support is, a private contractor, in a house 4 hours away. And so those are the sort of resources that we'll be able to tap into to fund and ensure that they, that there's a level playing field for security for our rural members and partners and citizens in Colorado.
Okay, well, someone mentioned registration and online registration. How do people register to vote? I'm aware of doing that at the motor vehicle registration, but does everyone do it there? Can you do it through the county clerk's office? Can you do it online? How does that work, Pam?
So in Colorado, we're very lucky. We have a lot of choice for voters and access points for voter registration. Online voter registration has been around for a few years now, and the Secretary of State's office just announced they had their 2 millionth online registration activity, which is a wonderful opportunity for folks to go in and make updates, affiliate, register as a new voter. It couldn't be easier. You just need a Colorado driver's license or ID to go online to govotecolorado.com. We have some elections coming up, so if you have some updates, please do that. But we also have a lot of access in other ways. The number one source for registration is what we call, in our parlance, motor voter. In other words, when you go in to update your driver's license or receive your driver's license, you're given an opportunity to register to vote. Our databases are now talking to each other. Our laws, after 2013, we had a lot of election reform, and with our partners in elections, like Common Cause and America Votes and a lot of activist groups, we've been able to implement really wonderful tools to make sure that those registrations are kept up to date. We can do national change of address comparisons. So when you move, most citizens think that the government is one amorphous blob and they know where you're going, and that's not necessarily the case. So we have a lot of technology and databases where we can compare and update and automatically update your registration. We're also comparing with other states, so we know when someone has moved out of state and is no longer eligible in Colorado.
How do you know that?
We do database comparisons. We participate, and Dwight can speak to this as well, in a wonderful project called the ERIC program. And it's an agency that member states can participate in, the Secretaries of State's office do. And you can compare databases with these states to see whether or not your voter has gone and moved to another state. And update and make those comparisons.
And that's by name, right?
Well, there's actually a significant matching criteria because one John Smith might be different than another John Smith. So we actually make those matches with 4 points, a minimum of 4 points of comparison. We also utilize correspondence to notify the voter and make sure that we've got the right person when we make any changes. But we also have in Colorado the ability to register up and through a close of polls on Election Day, so that no clerical or administrative error is any obstacle for a voter to register to vote.
Okay, and what about if people died? You get that information too?
We do. We do database comparisons with CDPHE, that's public health here in Colorado, and we do those daily, periodically, monthly, depending, and we ramp that up closer to an election and after an election. So there's a lot of work going on at your county clerk's offices and at your Secretary of State's office to ensure that those databases are as up to date as possible. It used to be that you went to a counter, you raised your right hand, it was an affidavit, and you were registered to vote. And we go through a lot more comparisons. Like we also ping the driver's license database and the Social Security database for validation as well. So there's security, there's access. We have a wonderful balance here in Colorado.
Okay, and how is someone removed from the database?
I feel like I'm talking a whole
That's
lot.
okay. You're the one who has that knowledge.
Doing it, Pam.
Right. Well, so, our database is wonderful in Colorado because it's a statewide system. It's live linked across all of the counties. And we actually maintain those records indefinitely in that system. So you may be canceled, for example, if you move out of state, but you are not removed from the system in the traditional sense that we used to see with paper. You may become inactive for very few reasons. The main reason is we send you correspondence from the county clerk's office or a ballot, and it returns as undeliverable. You are then temporarily placed in an inactive status until you either update your address or let us know that you're still there. Some people take some time to update their address. They don't use national change of address, or they don't update their driver's license address right away. And unless we hear from you, we need to make sure that registration system is as accurate as possible.
Okay, and do you send postcards out when you say you reach people?
Yeah, we send what's called a confirmation card.
And is it after you haven't voted in 2 elections, statewide elections? Is that right or not?
So that's a little bit dated.
Okay.
That information. It's a lot more live now. We do send a confirmation card after a general election to say our records indicate you did not vote, but it does not determine your status in any ways as a registered voter unless you've moved and it's come back as undeliverable. And then we make you inactive, which then any action by you activates you, whether it's coming to a vote center, letting us know, going online, all of those traditional access points that we have in Colorado.
Okay, does anyone in the audience have any questions about voter registration? Yes, there's a question here in the front.
So this is probably directed to the Secretary of State's office, but, so out of those 21 states, and I am from a tech background, so I know something about security. Do you know if anyone was not, well, if any data was taken beyond having databases pinged, probed, so to speak?
Yes, one state, they managed to get into the system. They were able to determine that none of the data within that system changed. And I apologize, I don't remember if they were able to confirm that data had been exported kind of maliciously. And I don't remember. I can find out.
Was that Arizona?
It was Illinois.
Illinois.
Actually. Yeah.
It was not Colorado. I'm just gonna say that. Not that, but just saying.
Well, one of the reasons I asked that is obviously you're talking about some very good techniques to like compare registrations and keep them up to date. But the more systems are connected in two directions, I mean, we all know, we've all heard about the back doors that have allowed breaches in commercial establishments and government. So often those aren't discovered till data has been removed for months. And so I guess I'm just reiterating, how confident are you that for example, the worry about registration is, say you get a ballot or you don't get a ballot and you don't realize it, and someone has hacked in and they've maybe removed certain party a chunk of people who are registered under one party or another.
So let me talk about that a little bit. It's a very good question. And the Secretary of State's office has been doing this long before this ever became a thing in 2016. Let me just say up front, I am not from a tech background. We have really, really smart people who are. So I know something about this, but I don't profess to be a subject matter expert here. But we independently test and scan our own system for any vulnerabilities. The Governor's Office of Information Technology also does that. In fact, I received a phishing attack today from actually the Department of Homeland Security asking me to click on a link that could have, contained malware. We are constantly tested on that. We hire firms to break our system. We've asked the DHS, after all this became public, the DHS has offered every state and local election office free vulnerability assessments and penetration testing. We fully availed ourselves of that. And we have all sorts of pretty sophisticated network monitoring tools where we know what's happening moment by moment on all of our systems, not just the voter registration system, but we also, with counties who take us up on this offer, we can also see into the county's network. Many counties have done that. Some haven't because they have their own independent monitoring. So it's not like you can do this once and be satisfied. This has to be a continual effort. And the last thing I'll say is on election day, we form a war room in our big conference room with the Governor's Office of Information Technology, the National Guard Cybersecurity Unit, and we're looking at all of our IT guys, and we're looking at absolutely every system constantly throughout the day until the polls close. So I think our response in this way has been robust. And the other thing I'll say, so that's what we do at the Secretary of State's office. The other thing to understand is that county election staff and county election judges need to work in that system real time. For many years, Colorado we've required cybersecurity training for every authorized user. We do background checks on them annually. Colorado was one of the first states in the country to change the system to require complex passwords that time out after 90 days and two-factor authentication. And this is something that both the Secretary of State's office and the Clerks Association continually stress to every individual user. And the system is very segmented. You can only get to so much with certain privileges, and there are relatively few people who have, privileges to like download the entire county data file, for example.
Well, and I think that's my point as well. I mean, all elections really are local. And I think technology has brought us wonderful things, wonderful efficiencies, wonderful access, wonderful tools to make things easier and more accessible for the voter, and to enable, it's brought our elections world, light years for what it's been, even when I first started. But elections people also know that we have contingencies for everything as well. So let's say, a system either locally or at the state goes down. We have paper ballots on hand and a backup poll book in order to continue voting, right? That's what we do. We build contingencies for any tool that we utilize in order to make sure that voters are able to cast and count their ballot in a timely manner.
Okay, I think we have another question.
Pam said that when you scan the voter records, you scan for 4 items, name, and I'm wondering, what are those 4 items that you scan for when you're looking for someone that might have moved out of state or something?
So some of the identifiers that we're looking at are name, address, previous addresses are also matching criteria, date of birth is a matching criteria, and another piece of information, for example, supplied ID, driver's license number, last 4 digits of your social security number. So there's multiple points of comparison. We need at least 4, right, in order to do it. So we can pull together that database information to say, what's our confidence level in ensuring that this is the same person? So it's not just the same 4 necessarily, but we're looking at whatever information we have available to us.
Okay, now one more question. How many false registrations do you have, or non-citizens trying to register? Are you aware of that? Is anyone aware of that here?
Yeah, I don't have statistics. So we periodically look at DHS's list of basically legal permanent residents, and compare that to our voter list.
And DHS is Department of Homeland Security?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
We do, I would call them very few instances where, and it usually results from just confusion by the person, where we have confirmed that non-citizens were registered. We communicate with them, we explain the issue, but the database we're using to do that isn't always up to date. So that it's often that we get, a larger list, and then we are able to pare it down because many of the people who initially appeared on that list became naturalized citizens later, and they were perfectly fine to register. And I have seen instances where a non-citizen on a paper voter registration form said, no, I am not a citizen, and human beings have to perform this data entry at a county. Human beings make mistakes, and that, somebody who was probably busy and stressed out on election day actually erroneously registered that person. So we do look at that. I would say that the instances of those occurrences are very rare and really the exception and by no means the rule.
25 are we talking about? 100, 1,000?
I can speak to that.
Okay.
I represented a county of 500,000 over 8 years, millions, of ballots cast over that time, and registration activity in 2008. I think we touched well over 1 million pieces of paper, updates and ballots, and just a lot of information. And over that time period, I could say less than a few dozen, when we're looking at those, were either they were erroneously registered. Remember, we have a lot of access to registration in our state. We have registration drives that are out there knocking on doors and at every festival telling people, really encouraging people to register to vote. They don't always tell them the rules around registration, and it's in the affidavit, but I'm not sure if you realize that humans don't always read everything they fill out and sign. So most of those instances, and a couple of dozens, were erroneous registrations. I think there were maybe, 1 or 2 that may have cast a single ballot erroneously. And I have to tell you, most of them were Canadian. So I'm going to put that out there. And they thought someone was offering it to them, they were eligible for some reason. And so, I do believe it's very rare. It's not that the rhetoric is, zero-sum game out there on the political front. And it's really not that way in our world and in the way we see it. It's not that, registration fraud or fraud in general doesn't exist. And it's not rampant, it's rare. We have protections and checks for it. But, and certainly we would love it to be perfect, but in a human system, that's a very, very high bar to set.
Okay, and I have another question. Are felons allowed, felons who have completed their time, are they allowed to vote? Because sometimes when you go door to door knocking, people will say, well, I'm a felon, I can't vote. Is that gone away?
I don't know that it was ever the rule in Colorado, but the current rule in Colorado.
Okay, that's what we want.
Yeah, is if you are a felon, if you've been convicted of a felony and are serving a sentence, probably in jail, so probably not anyone knocking on your door, or if you are on parole, then you are not allowed to vote. But as soon as you have completed your parole, you can register to vote, re-register to vote, and proceed to vote on you're qualified to vote on any issue that would otherwise be on your ballot, given where you live. So it's actually a short, well, depending on your sentence, it's a limited, defined period of time that you cannot vote. But the fact that you have a felony conviction in the past does not, if you've served your sentence and finished your parole, it doesn't disqualify you from voting. So please, everybody should register.
Okay, do you have a
Re-register.
question, John?
Let me share a story that I had from my own experience at Front Range, and this speaks to the outstanding way that Colorado is dealing with voter registration. I had a student, we were discussing registration in my class, and sort of went around the room and said, who's voted, who's not voted, who's not registered, who's registered. One student raised her hand, she said, I'm not registered, I cannot vote. I said, why? She says, because I'm a former felon, I'm an ex-felon. I said, I don't think that prohibits you from voting. We had a smart board there in the classroom, so we pulled up the Secretary of State's information to demonstrate that that was not true, and then in the next, minute and a half, we registered her to vote.
So very good. Okay, now we're going to talk about this risk-limiting audit. And Dwight, I think, how does the state propose to ensure the accuracy of this? I know it's not the easiest thing to explain, but let's do it.
So let me just give just a little background. So Colorado has required counties to conduct post-election audits since 2008, I believe. And the audits conducted in the past were, we call them random audits. Before every election, all counties must provide the Secretary of State's office with a complete list of all the tabulation devices they will be using in that election. And then the Secretary of State would randomly select in each county devices included from that list and tell the county, you need to most likely reset the results, randomly select 500 ballots that were originally counted on that device and rescan them, run a tabulation tape, and then human beings need to confirm that every ballot contest, the total votes from a human count by human beings matched that tabulation tape. And we've been doing that for years in Colorado. Those were some assurance that the devices were accurately tabulating ballots. But it wasn't the most robust methodology. It would have been possible for us, for example, to randomly select the one device that was working correctly and miss the 35 other devices that weren't, as an example. Now, I'm really confident that didn't happen, but that was just a kind of a shortcoming of that auditing methodology. In 2009, as Pam mentioned, the legislature adopted a statute that required Colorado to implement risk-limiting audits rather than random audits. And what a risk-limiting audit is it is statistically designed to discover an incorrect election outcome if one exists. The way they work is you audit enough ballots to statistically confirm that the reported outcome from the voting devices is correct. And if you never reach that statistical level of confidence, you keep auditing more and more ballots, and potentially the audit itself can result in a full hand count. Colorado, and we were supposed to start these in 2014, 2013? 14. And the technology just really didn't exist. The risk-limiting audits have been a theory for about the last 10 years, a really well-developed peer-researched theory, but not one that had ever really been implemented on the ground. So the legislature extended the implementation date until 2017. And last year, Colorado became the first state in the country ever to do. It wasn't statewide by sheer coincidence, but it was every county that used a voting system, a tabulation system, conducted and successfully passed a risk-limiting audit for the first time in the country. And we have more work we need to do there, but basically the process is the new voting systems, they will tell us, they capture data telling us how each voter marking in each ballot contest on each specific ballot was interpreted by the machine. And so using a lot of really kind of complicated algorithms, we randomly select in each county ballots, and it is a true random selection of ballots. And then a bipartisan audit board in each county basically reports to the Secretary of State's office the voter markings that the human beings are seeing on each paper ballot. When they complete that, we compare the human report to how the voting system interpreted those exact ballots. If they match, we're done. If they don't match and there's a discrepancy, we may have to audit more ballots in a subsequent round. Now, this is all very data and math intensive, which means we absolutely require a software solution to be able to implement these, because there's no point in doing a risk-limiting audit after your Canvas board certifies official results. And we have a very narrow window between when we tabulate all ballots and when the canvass happens. So what we found is there were some discrepancies in some counties. Those were user errors in the auditing software, not real discrepancies between the human and machine interpretation. But that's okay, because this is the first time anybody has ever done this, and we learned that we need to modify the software a little bit to make it more usable by the county audit boards. But all in all, it was a really tremendously successful first effort, and we actually made a documentary of the effort, because I know this sounds kind of election geeky and in the weeds and very detailed, but this is a very, very hot topic throughout the country. And we actually invited Rhode Island to come and watch us. They have legislation that will require them to go to this type of audit not later than 2020. And they were very interested to see how we did it.
Okay, why don't you tell us how to see the video? I think it's on YouTube, is
Yes,
that right?
it is on YouTube. I'm sorry, I don't have the link. I think they're going to put the link on the website.
Not if there's many indexed risk-limited audit searches on YouTube.
So if you just go to
wanna
YouTube-
just do that, you might find it.
Yeah, just go to YouTube, and in YouTube search Colorado Risk-Limiting Audit, and it will take you there.
Yes, yes. Well,
and-
we watched it and we thought it was very good, but we needed you to explain it.
So
Now,
that's
do you have any-
what that's all about.
Yeah, do you have any questions, the panel? John, you question this at all?
I think he did a pretty good job of explaining it, and I think what heartens me about the concept is that it's about calibrating calibrating our system in advance of catastrophe, in advance of a Florida or an Ohio. And we shouldn't have to wait till there's a margin of 40 votes to be knowing whether or not it's accurate. So I don't have any, you did a good job of explaining it.
Thank you.
More people need to know about it, of course.
And I think there is a backup plan, right? You mentioned that earlier.
With
Risk-limiting audit, you just do it until you're happy, and you could have a lot of hand-counted ballots as well, right?
Right. I mean, worst case scenario, let's assume the worst case, because elections are becoming increasingly technological. That means there are computers involved. That means there are more ways, more vulnerabilities to the security of the systems. So let's assume the worst case involves or happens, and somebody inserts malware that changes a vote total. That is a huge concern in states that do not have paper records, paper ballots, because there's no way they can compare anything. In Colorado, I mean, believe me, that will be the worst day of my life if that ever happens. I'm not minimizing it at all. But in Colorado, we have an absolute fallback where if something horrible happens, we can say, forget the machine tabulation, every county hand count every ballot, and those are the results that we're going to use.
Okay, go ahead, Pam.
I also do think we should have a discussion about how accurate hand counting is. However, we might consider, bringing in a different system someday down the road. Because I don't know if anyone has ever served on a canvas board or an audit board, but when you can count ballots, sometimes the result ends up being off, and it's always in the hand count because humans are not good counters. We're just not. So what we love about this audit too is that we're actually sampling election ballots. We are sampling, we've had the pre-test of our equipment. We've used a test deck of live ballots that we're sending, but in the past we haven't tested voter cast ballots because we haven't had the technology to extract the records from the equipment to do that. And so I think I've been very excited about this. I was legislative co-chair and had a lot of questions about this process, knowing that we had a lot of development work to do. We still have work to do on this topic, but What's great about Colorado is we're always looking for ways to improve the entire system and how we validate and have confidence in outcome.
Well, about, I don't know, maybe 40 years ago, I was involved in a recount of a county commissioner's race. And we counted ballots, and we were 2 and 4 off after I don't know how many times, and we finally got the same result twice, but it was the hanging chads,
Yeah.
the punch cards. It was an interesting process. Let's see, any questions from the audience? There's one in the back and then in the front.
I have a very quick question. What do you do with all those ballots? How long do you keep them and where do they go? And then, if time permits, I'd like to know what all of the panelists think about, again, the possibility someday of all voting taking place solely on the internet without any paper ballots at all.
Yeah. Well, our retention schedule for all election records in a particular election, registration excluded. We have a database, we keep them always, is 25 months. So we keep them for quite some time through any recount, through any potential contest, and then some. Because of course, we're also doing federal elections, and the process for seating federal elected officials is longer than local. On the internet voting, we have a form of transmission of ballots for military overseas voters for voting. We have some security around there. If you think the debate about voting equipment is perky, talk about internet voting in any room with anyone with technology, and you'll have a very big debate on whether or not it can ever be done safely and securely. The question from the public policy and the enfranchisement and civic participation is, I have 2 kids, 20 and 18, and voting on paper is an anachronism for them. And so how do we engage our electorate down into the future? I have a lot of confidence that very smart people are going to figure out how to do this. And I think in my own opinion, I think it's important to do that to make sure we have an engaged electorate.
Okay, question in the front.
Can I just want to chime in. I'm going to disagree with Pam a little bit here on
Oh, that's fine, good.
on the internet voting. It is a difficult problem. So people always ask, if I can bank and trade stocks online, why can't I vote online? And it is a difficult problem to solve because your bank wants to know exactly who you are at all points through that transaction. For voting, we want to know who you are at the start, but when you actually submit your ballot, no one should ever be able to trace that ballot to you. And that creates a lot of systemic problems. I know that there are companies now exploring blockchain as a way to do this. The technology guys that worked with a lot on risk-limiting audits are freaking out about that. I don't know if this will ever be solved. So I'm kind of a wait and see kind of guy.
Okay, in the front, question.
I've long had concerns about that perky argument about voting machines, especially when they first came out and they were being manufactured by questionable companies. You gave me the impression during your discussion that different counties are allowed to choose what machine they buy, or is there a standardized machine across the state?
Yeah, so let me address that. Colorado law prohibits any county from using any voting system, and by that I mean vote tabulation system, unless it has been certified for use by the Secretary of State. So there's actually multiple layers of assessing the accuracy and security of the systems. First, there's a very lengthy certification campaign where we work with a federally accredited voting systems testing laboratory to ensure that that system meets all of the applicable federal and state requirements. And then before each election, every county conducts a logic and accuracy test to make sure that election is programmed correctly. And then after each election, every county conducted formerly the random post-election audits and now the risk-limiting audits. So in Colorado at this point, we have 50, this is another area where Colorado is really ahead of the curve in comparison to other counties. For this primary election upcoming, 59 of 64 counties will have transitioned to a new voting system. 58 of those counties are using the Dominion voting system. One of those counties is using a different voting system, but it is a modern system that also supports a risk-limiting audit called the Clear Ballot system. So we have 5 more counties to go before we're completely modernized throughout the state. And at this point, they can select among those 2. It's their choice. Clear Ballot, we just certified Clear Ballot last December, which is, why they don't have the representation out in the counties. But basically, that is over 92% of the state's electorate is using a modern voting system to conduct their elections. And remembering, even the legacy systems, those are all paper-based too. So again, if the worst happens, we have the paper we can go back to should we need it.
Okay, another question.
2 questions. One, intelligence information coming from federal levels to the state. I believe there was an issue with the security clearances being garnered by the state individuals. And so I was wondering what the status of that was, and in the process of getting that information, once those clearances are granted, distributing that information down to the county level, if appropriate, county levels individuals having clearances. Where are we in that process? The second question is along the lines of funding. I believe there were federal funds made available for modernization. Did all that cover? I mean, you've just talked about an extensive statewide modernization process. Was that all covered by federal funds or matching state funds, or how did that work?
Boy, really good questions.
Oh, well, we don't have much time left, 6 minutes, 7 minutes.
I'll do this in about 2 minutes, I think.
Okay, good.
So with respect to the security clearances, when President Obama's DHS secretary said that election infrastructure is critical infrastructure, none of us really knew what that meant. And the communication between, and I think DHS would be the first to admit this, from DHS to the states, and it was not good. It took a long time. So now DHS is working on a process so that, the chief election officer in every state, and in Colorado that's the Secretary of State, gets a security clearance so that information can be transmitted much more quickly. But the security, we already had networks in place where we knew about particular threats way before DHS ever told us. These are voluntary organizations where, states and counties and locality, all of those IT people are talking together saying, this looks weird, be on alert. So, there was a lack of communication. It was very frustrating for the states to keep hearing 21 states have been, depending on who you listen to, scanned or penetrated or whatever. And nobody, I mean, it's like, did they call you? No, nobody in the states knew. So I must say that DHS has made a very concerted effort to improve the communication protocols, and it is vastly improved, and I expect that to continue. The one thing I don't know is when the state officials get the security clearances, what that means as far as transmitting it to counties. I just don't know the answer to that, because part of having a security clearance is you can't divulge everything you know with people who don't, right? So I know they're working on it. I don't know what the answer to that question was. And I'm sorry, now I've forgotten your second question.
Funding.
Oh, yes. So Colorado, we are really blessed with great county clerks who saw the end of life of our legacy voting systems coming many years ago, planned many years ago. Those plans were derailed by the Great Recession for a couple of years, but basically the 59 counties who modernized did that almost entirely with county money. The Secretary of State contributed half of the implementation and training costs for the Dominion system, which, overall that may be $1 million total. But largely this was all county money. And I think they all did that because what we were all hearing is Congress is never going to allocate more money for voting systems. And then lo and behold, boom, Colorado now has $6.3 million. We've already done a lot of the modernization, but there are other needs, as Pam talked about.
Well, and I would just say that Colorado is, with their legislature and the county clerks pushing, are very forward-thinking. We follow our voters, and implementing our model of voting with mail ballot delivery and vote centers and putting resources where the voters are, not going in person, but preferring to vote by mail, but having a hybrid system, minimize that replacement cost across the state so that we weren't wasting resources. $6 million wouldn't have covered my county with a full system. So we knew that funding wasn't going to be there, and with our partners in this field, we were able to pass a reform that really was very forward-thinking. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to one of my mentors, Scott Doyle, former Larimer County Clerk and Recorder, and Angela Myers, who's a leader in our association now. And we're, continuing, always not looking for help elsewhere, but really trying to follow the needs of our citizens and our voters.
Okay, how about a closing comment from John and then from Elizabeth? We're at our time limit.
I would like to say that I'm a native of Colorado, but I lived in Texas for 25 years. And I feel very good about my home state when it comes to elections. And when I see that Texas, for instance, does not have online registration and had a federal judge just tell Texas that it wasn't following the federal law by allowing people to actually register or renew their voting registration when they got their driver's licenses online. And we haven't mentioned some of the very, I'm going to say, dangerous efforts to make it harder for people to vote in various states. I think that is a battle that needs to be fought by a lot of people. And Colorado has been a peaceful area regarding that, but I think we always need to be on the lookout for the tendency to make it harder for people to vote for whatever reason there is. And as she explained, this whole issue of illegal voting is really the voter ID efforts are really a solution in search of a problem.
Okay, Elizabeth.
I started out by saying that I didn't think voters were terribly concerned about the security of on a day-to-day basis when I speak to them on the phone. I think having listened to Dwight and Pam and all the questions and answers on this panel, that you all will understand why we shouldn't be worried in Colorado. I think the Secretary of State's office does an amazing job. I've visited with a lot of clerks all around the state of Colorado over the last 6 or 7 years, and they all do amazing jobs of trying to get the election right. So.
Okay, good. Thank you. And thank you to our panel and our studio audience and our viewing audience. If you'd like to see this and other CrossCurrents programs, you can go to the League of Women Voters website. I think they're showing it on the screen. And you can go to the YouTube website, which is also on your screen. Thanks so much.